If you'd asked anyone who knew us, they would have called us solid, maybe even enviable. Marcus and I had been married 8 years, and from the outside, we looked like the couple who had figured it out. He had his boutique consulting firm that let him wear tailored blazers and talk strategy over overpriced espresso. I managed the art gallery my godmother left me, turning my love for visual storytelling into a career that felt both personal and rewarding. We had the kind of life people post about: weekend farmers markets, minimalist kitchen renovations, candid selfies in Santorini. But that's the thing about curated happiness. It leaves out the stillness, the silence, the slow drifting you don't notice until you're already out at sea. When my grandmother passed away the year before, I was devastated, but also quietly relieved. She'd been battling for so long, and in the end, she went peacefully in her sleep, exactly the way she wanted. Her last letter to me was folded neatly inside a pale blue envelope, hand-addressed in that delicate script I used to watch her practice with fountain pens. "For your future, my darling," she wrote. Inside was the deed to her property in the Berkshires, and a statement confirming she'd left me her entire savings, just under $380,000. Enough to start over if I ever needed to. Enough to walk away from anything that no longer felt right. At the time, I didn't realize how prophetic that gift would be. Marcus was gracious when I told him. He wrapped his arms around me, kissed the top of my head, and whispered, "She loved you so much." And for a moment, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But then he said something that caught, like a tiny fishhook in my chest. "That kind of money changes things." He laughed when he said it, offhand, like it was a joke. But it didn't feel like one. The first shift was subtle. He suddenly became interested in budgeting apps, wanting to streamline our finances. He offered to help me consolidate accounts, saying it would make things easier come tax season. I pushed back gently. I'd always been the one to manage our shared bills, and my grandmother's money felt too sacred to mix into the chaos of our day-to-day spending. He let it go, or so I thought. We weren't fighting. That's the thing. There was no dramatic unraveling, no shouting matches or ultimatums. Just a growing sense that I was living beside someone I no longer recognized. He stopped asking me about my work. He came home later. He'd scroll on his phone with that blank expression that made me feel like a guest in my own kitchen. Sometimes I'd look at him and feel like I was staring at a man-shaped ghost, someone who used to be filled with warmth and humor and now just wasn't. I didn't tell anyone, not at first, because to speak it aloud would have made it real. And besides, what would I even say? That my husband of nearly a decade, the man who still made me coffee every morning, had become a stranger with soft eyes and sharp absences? It wasn't enough to call a lawyer. It wasn't even enough to call my best friend. Then came the retreat. He said he needed space to reconnect with himself, that he was feeling burnout, that the city noise, the expectations, the routine, it was all too much. He found this place upstate, all sustainable architecture and guided meditations and digital detox policies. "Just 10 days," he told me. "No phones, no pressure. I just need to hear myself think." I smiled and told him I understood. I even helped him pack. What he didn't know, what he never thought to consider, was that I'd already begun to hear myself think too. And what I heard was warning bells. Marcus left just after breakfast on a Thursday. He kissed me on the forehead like always, said something vague about traffic, and promised he'd call when he got to the retreat, though he reminded me, again, that phones were discouraged. "It's all about unplugging," he said with that rehearsed smile I'd started to notice more and more. Like his expressions were becoming performative. Perfect on the outside, hollow underneath. He rolled his suitcase out the door and didn't look back. I stood by the window for a long time after the Uber pulled away. I kept thinking about how calm I felt. That's what surprised me most. How unsurprised I was by his exit. Something had been shifting between us for a while, and it felt like this so-called wellness retreat was less about healing and more about hiding. From what? I wasn't sure yet, but the feeling lodged in my chest like a stone. Still, I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe I was just projecting. Maybe he really did need space. Maybe the silence between us wasn't something sinister. It was just what happens to couples who stop tending the fire. I even tried to meditate like he did. It didn't work. My mind kept circling back to one thing, the inheritance. I hadn't fully trusted him with the money. And for good reason. When I told him I wanted to keep it in a separate account, he made a comment that didn't sit right with me. "We're married, Christabel. What's yours is mine, remember?" He laughed after, but it felt like a test balloon disguised as a joke. So I kept it separate. Quiet. I didn't even tell him about the additional brokerage account I'd opened with my grandmother's advisor. Just in case. 2 days into his retreat, something didn't add up. I got a text from his assistant asking if I could forward Marcus the Johnson brief. He said he lost Wi-Fi again. Wi-Fi! I thought they were supposed to be off-grid. No phones, no laptops, no screens. The message was short, but it split my trust wide open. I logged into our shared desktop, one of the few things we hadn't yet streamlined. It was still connected to our joint email, and Marcus, ever the creature of habit, never cleared his digital footprints. That's when I saw it, a hotel reservation confirmation from 3 days ago. Not a wellness resort, not some minimalist eco cabin in the woods. A 5-star luxury suite in Montauk. Beachfront, balcony with private plunge pool, and booked for 2 guests. I froze. I read it again, and again. The check-in name was his. The confirmation email had gone to his inbox, which he must have forgotten to unlink from our desktop. I scrolled further. Another email. A receipt for a spa couples massage. Dinner reservation under Marcus plus L. I felt my hands start to tingle. Not from panic, but from that eerie sense of emotional déjà vu. As if the betrayal had already happened long ago and I was just now catching up to it. I clicked through transaction after transaction, each one slicing a little deeper. A lingerie boutique in Soho. A $6,000 charge labeled discretionary wellness expense from our joint account. And finally, a wire transfer. $178,400. Gone. Moved from my account. The account with my name on it. Labeled Joint Redistribution for Household Realignment. Household realignment. He'd stolen nearly half of my inheritance and used it to play out a romantic fantasy with a woman named Elle while pretending to be on a meditative sabbatical. But here's what made me smile, genuinely smile, for the first time in weeks. He thought that account was all there was. He had no idea that I'd quietly moved the other half months ago when the first warning bell rang in my chest like a war drum. He didn't know that I'd started documenting unusual activity, or that I'd already met with a lawyer, or that I had every receipt, every wire transfer, every breadcrumb. He thought I'd be crying in our kitchen while he sipped champagne with Elle on the balcony, but he didn't know I was already writing the final act of a story he thought he was starring in. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought there would be some cinematic moment, me crumpled on the floor, mascara bleeding down my face, screaming into a throw pillow. But instead, I sat at the desk with my fingers lightly resting on the mouse, scrolling through what felt like the autopsy of my marriage. The facts were all there, cold and clinical. Dates, transactions, locations, names. His infidelity wasn't a sudden stab in the dark. It was slow poison, a sequence of choices, each one as deliberate as the last. Elle had been around longer than I'd realized. There were little clues buried everywhere. A forwarded flight itinerary from March. He told me he was in Chicago for a client pitch. Turns out he never made it past LaGuardia. A lift receipt from her apartment building. A dinner reservation in her name, but charged to our card. The audacity was surgical. It wasn't just the affair, it was the entitlement. As if my inheritance, my grief-born safety net, was simply a pool of cash for him to dip into whenever he wanted to impress his side project with oysters and ocean views. But what twisted the knife wasn't the money. It was the fact that he didn't even try to hide it that well. He thought I'd never look. He thought I'd be too naive, too trusting, too wifely to notice. That assumption lit a fire in me I didn't know I was capable of. I poured a glass of wine. Malbec, the good one I'd been saving for a dinner party that now would never happen, and I started organizing everything. I created folders. One for financials, one for communication logs, one for Elle, who apparently worked in wellness PR and had a taste for mid-century furniture and red-bottom heels, all conveniently purchased with my money. Then I found the journal. We had one of those smart home speakers, the kind that syncs everything. Our grocery lists, reminders, shared calendars. But it also synced to Marcus's Cloud Notes app. I clicked out of muscle memory, and suddenly there it was, a a string of voice-to-text entries titled Personal Clarity. And within that folder, weeks, months of reflections, rambly, narcissistic little monologues about realigning energy and releasing toxic structures. Most of it was pseudo-spiritual nonsense he clearly parroted from Elle. But some of it was about me. I think Christabel senses something. She's quieter, more observant, but she won't do anything. She likes the idea of control more than the reality of confrontation. I read that line 5 times. He thought I wouldn't do anything, that I didn't have it in me. What he didn't know was that while he was journaling into the cloud like a self-help junkie with a god complex, I had already spoken to a lawyer. Quietly. No declarations. No drama. Just facts. I told her I had concerns about financial misconduct, that I needed advice on protecting inherited assets, that I wanted to know what would happen if a spouse tried to repurpose funds without consent. Her eyes had lit up. "You're smart," she'd said. "You're early. Early. I like that word." The next day, I called the bank. I told them I needed a detailed breakdown of every transaction from the last 6 months, both from our joint account and from the personal account Marcus had helped me set up. I didn't tell them why. I didn't need to. When the statements came in, they read like a confession. Dozens of withdrawals and transfers I hadn't authorized. Hotel stays, jewelry, designer clothes, all under merchant codes labeled wellness, consulting, or the infuriatingly vague miscellaneous personal. He really thought that would work. Like the IRS doesn't exist. Like I don't exist. I spent the next week living a double life. To Marcus, I was the patient, understanding wife who had sent him off to find himself. But behind the scenes, I was building a legal case, compiling a digital war chest of every lie, every theft, every soft smile he used as camouflage while he dismantled our marriage piece by piece. It felt good, powerful, not vengeful exactly, just corrective, like reality was finally catching up to the illusion. By the time I got the final statement showing the full extent of the funds withdrawn from my inheritance account, $178,400 routed into a shell business he had registered under an LLC with Elle's name listed as creative partner, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was ready. He thought he was playing chess. What he didn't know is that I had switched boards months ago. It started with a feeling. Not a dramatic discovery, no lipstick on the collar or unknown perfume on the sheets, just a slow, subtle erosion. I used to believe that heartbreak came with a bang, but for me, it began in the quiet moments. Like the way he stopped finishing his coffee in the mornings, the way he'd glance at his phone mid-conversation, the way he touched me less, talked less, and started using corporate buzzwords like realignment and emotional reinvestment when we argued. If I'd blinked, I might have missed it. But I didn't. I saw it, and I listened. It was late November, cold, quiet, and the kind of dark that feels like it soaks into your bones, when I decided to stop reacting and start preparing. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea in one hand and a legal pad in the other. I made 2 lists. One labeled what I know, the other what I don't. What I know was short but sharp. Marcus was emotionally unavailable, overly interested in our finances, and increasingly secretive about his travel. What I don't was longer, murkier. Had he cheated? Was he hiding something else? Was I overthinking? But at the bottom of the page I wrote, even if nothing is happening, I need to be protected in case something does. And that's when I reached out to Eleanor. Eleanor isn't just a lawyer. She's the lawyer. She once handled a divorce where the wife ended up keeping the house, the yacht, and the dog, even though all 3 were in the husband's name. We weren't close friends, but I'd helped her get a show for her art collection at the gallery. I knew she owed me a favor. I called her under the guise of asking for estate planning advice. "Just hypotheticals," I said. "Nothing urgent." She saw through me in 5 seconds flat. "You're either planning a move," she said, "or surviving one." "Which is it?" "Both," I told her. She smiled. Smart girl. Over peppermint tea in her Midtown office, I learned about trusts, fiduciary tracing, and the legal differences between marital assets and inheritance. More importantly, I learned that emotional betrayal doesn't have to be proven in court for financial protection to be put in place. "You don't need to wait for him to crash the car," she said. If he's driving drunk, get out now. So I started small. I opened a trust in my name only, funded with half the inheritance. Quietly, cleanly, I moved the gallery's future earnings into a new business account, severing it from our household books. I called my grandmother's financial advisor and asked for everything in writing. Every statement, every transaction, every clause that confirmed this money was mine by blood, not by marriage. I even changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. Bit by bit, I wove a safety net beneath my feet. And Marcus had no idea, because I played it exactly the way he expected me to. Compliant, kind, distracted. I let him think I was leaning on yoga and bath bombs while he schemed on balconies with Elle. I didn't confront him when he started suggesting co-ownership of my grandmother's cottage. I just smiled and said, "Let's revisit that after your retreat." I let him feel safe. That was the secret. Let him feel safe. People like Marcus never see it coming when you don't scream, when you don't slam doors or make scenes. They're used to women who perform pain. They're not ready for women who prepare through it. Around this time, I started seeing a therapist. Not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to. I wanted to process, not perform. I told her everything. Every doubt, every instinct, every step I was taking. She looked at me like she was watching someone put on armor. "You're not scared," she said once. "You're done." She was right. When Marcus left for his retreat, everything was already in place. The money was protected. The documents were ready. The lawyer was on standby. I wasn't just prepared for the worst. I was waiting for it. I was daring it to happen. He thought he'd emptied me out. He didn't realize I'd already cashed in my illusion of who he was. And now that I had the full picture, the lies, the transfers, the woman, I wasn't interested in confrontation. I was interested in consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't show up at his 5-star fantasy love nest. I didn't even call. Instead, I sent a package. Overnight delivery. Hand-signed for. He would have received it sometime between the avocado toast and the couple's Reiki session. Inside, 3 envelopes. The first, a letter. Not handwritten, typed, clinical, emotionless. It outlined the discovery of the unauthorized financial transfers from the trust in my name. I included the account numbers, dates, and legal definitions of misappropriation of non-marital assets in the state of New York. At the bottom, this document has been reviewed and approved by counsel. The second envelope contained a temporary restraining order, not against him, but against any continued withdrawal or usage of funds originating from my inheritance. My attorney had filed an emergency injunction, freezing all shared accounts and placing the remaining funds under court supervision until further investigation. The moment he opened that envelope, his credit cards were already declining. The third, divorce papers, served under the grounds of financial betrayal and marital fraud. No post-it notes, no passive-aggressive quips, no dramatic flourish. Just paperwork, clinical, undeniable, and devastating. I didn't hear from him for 48 hours, but Elle did. Or rather, her lawyer did. You see, I'd done my homework. That luxury suite, booked with funds tied to a misappropriated account, which meant the lingerie, the massage, the $3,200 designer handbag he gifted her, they were all technically obtained with stolen assets. I had my lawyer issue her a formal notice of financial entanglement and potential liability, not as an accusation, but as a courtesy. A neat little message saying, "You may have unknowingly benefited from funds that are now under legal dispute. We recommend you retain counsel." Nothing scares a wellness entrepreneur quite like real legal exposure. Her Instagram, once all crystal grids and bikini yoga, went dark within the hour. By the time Marcus got back to the city, he wasn't walking into our home. He was walking into a minefield. The locks had been changed. The security system recoded. His name removed from all utilities. He texted me 3 times. I didn't respond. He called, blocked. Then, finally, he emailed. Subject: "What the hell is going on?" Body: "We can talk about this. You're being reactive." Reactive. That word. As if I had thrown a tantrum. As if he hadn't stolen from me, lied to me, cheated on me, and planned a new life with another woman funded by my grandmother's legacy. So I sent him one final reply. Subject: "This is not a reaction." Body: "This is a response." And that was it. No theatrics. No confrontation at the door with a suitcase and mascara running. Just consequences, quietly delivered, right to his ocean view suite. He wanted a retreat. Now he had one, permanently. From my life. I never saw him again, not in person. No dramatic last meeting, no teary monologue, no begging at the door. He became a name on legal documents, a shadow filtered through lawyers and mediators. The man who once slept beside me now existed only in PDF attachments and digital correspondence marked urgent. And I was fine with that, relieved even. Because once the silence set in, I realized something strange, something no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't hollow you out. It clears you. Like smoke after a fire, when the wreckage is still warm but the air is suddenly, finally breathable. I moved out a month after the freeze went through. The apartment had never really felt like mine. Not the sterile countertops he chose. Not the ergonomic furniture that looked like it belonged in a Scandinavian tech office. I let him keep it. Let him sit in the middle of his empty, modern sanctuary and remember that every inch of it had been funded, in part, by the woman he tried to outsmart. I took the cottage, my grandmother's place in the Berkshires. It needed work, paint, plumbing, windows that groaned like old knees in the wind. But it was mine. I could hear her in the creak of the stairs, in the warmth of the fireplace. She never let go out. I spent weeks in overalls and paint-splattered hoodies, tearing out what didn't belong and rebuilding what did. I replaced every light bulb myself. I planted lavender by the porch. I got a dog, named her Juniper. She doesn't leave my side. People asked me if I ever wanted revenge. If I wanted to ruin him, drag him, scorch the earth he walked on. But that's not what I wanted. He doesn't get to be the central character in my life anymore. My revenge was subtler than headlines or humiliation. It was in every peaceful morning I woke up not wondering who he was texting. It was in the silence of a bank account untouched by theft. It was in the moment Elle sent me a groveling DM from a burner account, asking if I would please drop the liability claim because he said it wasn't like that. I didn't respond. Blocked. Deleted. Done. My lawyer tells me I'll recover the bulk of what he took. Eventually. The shell company dissolved, his consulting firm tanked, and by the time his lawyers tried to negotiate, the leverage was already mine. I don't need the money, but it'll be nice when it arrives. What mattered more was what I kept. My name, my dignity, my peace. Some nights, I sit on the porch with a glass of wine and watch the sky turn navy. There's no city noise, no buzzing phones, just quiet, honest air. I used to think peace was something you stumbled into. Now I know, it's something you claim. Marcus thought he'd stolen my future. What he really did was force me to build a better one. And this one, he'll never get near it.